Amazon is not the only retailer offering massive discounts during Prime Day. Walmart and Target are among the big names slashing prices too, doing everything they can to attract shoppers. And the long list of deals is so extensive that our next guest is calling this week, quote, Christmas in July. We want to bring in Jerry Storch. He's a former vice chairman of Target, also former CEO of Toys R Us. Jerry, it's great to see you. So certainly a massive week here for retail. There's lots of debate going on right now just about the buying power that consumers have. What do you think we'll learn from the deals and from the buying activity that we're seeing during Prime Day and also at some of Amazon's biggest competitors over the next couple of days?
So I think the event will be successful. Amazon is throwing everything at it. They need to show they can generate more growth than what they've shown in the past. So the past few Prime events, just like Amazon sales quarter after quarter, have just been up a little bit, not enough or not consistent with their path growth trajectory. So they're advertising heavily on TV. They're throwing a lot of deals at this thing. They're advertising deals by their partners. They're pushing this very hard to make sure it's successful. I believe it will be successful. And so that means if they sold $12 billion, counting their partner sales last year, maybe it'll be up to $14 or $15 billion this year, which is pretty darn good over the 2 days. Putting that in perspective, that means in those 2 days they'd sell as much in total as maybe, Nordstrom or Kohl's or someone sells their entire business for the whole year. So that sounds great. What we don't know is whether they're just pulling sales forward from later in the year or whether this will be kind of the last gasp of a beleaguered consumer.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. When you think about where we are in the year, the offerings themselves from Amazon, they're sort of the usual discounts that you talked about, but also this year they've added travel and partnerships on that front to add to the discounts for Prime Day at a time when we have seen consumers really shell out money on that end, even though they're saving on some of the more discretionary items too. I wonder how you're looking at that balance, the priorities that are shifting right now for the average consumer.
No doubt whatsoever. Consumers have been shifting from buying things to services. And you hear that, all the time, from every source. That's true. That is happening. And in fact, when you look at retail sales and take out restaurants for the last 10 straight months, that year-over-year growth has actually been negative when you strip out inflation. So they're not buying things. Now, you often hear they're buying services, and we hear the great stories of how airlines are doing so well, or hotels, for example, or restaurants. And those are up. We are seeing growth there, but it's starting to slow down. Where the real growth in services, when you look at the numbers, is in healthcare services and in paying for rent, which is included in services when you look at a lot of the government reports. So sometimes I think the story isn't being told correctly when they keep saying, the consumer is still spending. Well, you got to pay for healthcare and you got to pay for rent. A lot of healthcare was pent-up demand from the pandemic. There are these categories still. They're not big enough, though, to really, shift the entire economy or consumer spending of travel and dining out. Those are still up. But I think we need to watch them very carefully because you're hearing stories now like occupancy rates in hotels in Florida are down year over year. You're getting these little snippets that don't quite sound as good as they were before.
Well, then, Jerry, given all that, the importance of discounting, of this promotional activity, are we going to see even more of that over the next several months heading into the holidays, given the fact that people don't have that much extra money to spend on some of these discretionary items?
Well, retailers worked very hard to get their inventories down. As you know, many got bloated inventories, at the end of the pandemic when they panic bought, thinking that suppliers wouldn't ship, and then suddenly all the suppliers shipped at once, and inventories surged, and you had retailers that were up, 50% year over year, that kind of number, crazy numbers of inventory, and they worked hard to get those down. So I know people are still trying to be careful, but I don't believe that most retailers have processed just how weak this holiday season could be. Again, I don't know that it will be. It just could be weak. And if the holiday season is weak, we're going to be back in that same thick soup of too much inventory. And the only way through that is going to be through a lot of markdowns, as you mentioned. So I expect to be very tough sledding for a while here. Consumer debt has been mounting. Delinquencies have been rising. I know everyone says, the consumer is still spending. I don't know what they're talking about. Again, keep in mind a lot of these money there, the growth is due to inflation. And then when you strip out some of the necessity services I mentioned, it doesn't look that good all in all.
Jerry, this Prime Day comes at a time when we have seen Amazon's e-commerce business, start to pull back a bit. Sure, it's still relatively strong when you compare it to its competitors, but we have seen the growth flatten out. Is that specific to what we're seeing on the macro front, or are these years of just double-digit, just incredible growth that we have seen from Amazon on the e-commerce front, is that sort of behind us?
Things don't grow into the sky. So I think it's unrealistic to believe that it can start growing again at 25% a year as the numbers that they used to be posting. But I believe they can get out of the single digits and into the low double digits. That's totally doable. And I expect them to do that for these Prime days, given how hard they've pushed this and where it's falling in the calendar and how the consumer is acting. There's a lot of values here and necessities. I know my first Amazon Prime purchase that I made just after midnight today, my wife said, "Oh, did you buy a lot of exciting things?" I said, "Yeah, I got a great deal on Advil and Pepcid and, all kinds of cool stuff, a window washing solution." There's a lot of necessities hidden in those Amazon numbers. So I believe it's going to be a tremendous Prime Day for them, and they're going to reverse that trend where they've been growing single digits on Prime days. You're showing a chart now that shows that. I think they're going to grow double digits during this Prime Day. That doesn't mean we're going to have a great holiday. That's the difference. It might be that they're pulling things. Again, I'm not going to buy any more Pepsi just because I got it on deal. I hope not. Though I'm eating out more, so maybe so. But nevertheless, the reality is that some of this is definitely pulled forward. As a longtime retailer, I can tell you, anytime you have a sale, you can't just study that sale in abstraction. You've held sales off. They've been advertising Prime Day for a week on the site. That means some of the sales people might have been booked for Amazon last week. People were holding off, waiting to see if it went on sale for Prime Day. So there's a suck-in, I call it a suck-in factor and a suck-out factor, where you're sucking goods into the sale and you're sucking sales out of the future and into the sale. And so we have to analyze all of that at the end of the day to see how good it was.
And Jerry, with all of this said, given the fact that it is a very challenging landscape here, more broadly speaking, for retailers, I'm curious, what are you hearing from those within the industry just about the headwinds or the risk that the restart of student loan payments, what that's going to do to some of these businesses and how big of an impact that might have on consumer purchases from here on out?
Most people are worried about it. They just don't know how to quantify it, right? They're not sure, too, what kind of extra steps might be taken. There's all kinds of talks about ways that might extend or defer the impact of that. But most people I speak to view that as yet one more concern for the fall season. Everyone knows it's not good. Where is it going to be worse? Again, discretionary items, apparel, right? And again, purchases of things, things that I don't really have to make. We expect those to be stressed for the holiday season. Everyone knows it, but no one knows how to quantify that impact. And we really aren't going to know until we start getting into the mix of it.
Yeah, a growing list of headwinds for the retail space, but it's certainly good to have your perspective and your context on it. Jerry Storch, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.